You're listening to a new episode of New Worker Radio presented by the Communist Workers Platform, bringing you national and international news from a worker's perspective. If you're outraged over high costs of living, soaring rents, and the stress of navigating day-to-day life, consider the CWP USA to fight for a real change. To learn more and sign up, go to cwpusa.org. You can find more news and updates like this in our national newspaper, New Worker, at newworker.us. And now, onto our program.
In today's episode, we'll dive into an overview of two recent labor struggles. The first highlighting the San Francisco teacher strike, and after, the struggle of the Chattanooga, Tennessee Volkswagen workers. After that, we'll provide a rundown on the U.S. amassing of military forces in the Middle East, with a target on Iran. And lastly, we have a segment submitted by guest speaker Nathan Richardson, author at Democracy Around We Need, about the need to break away from the illusions of the Democrats and not be fooled by figures like Mamdani. After 4 days of school closures, the teacher strike in San Francisco has ended after the San Francisco Unified School District and the Union United Educators of San Francisco reached a preliminary agreement on the morning of Friday, February 13th. The school district states that the agreement was signed at 5:30 a.m. During the strike, schools were closed to students and operations were disrupted for tens of thousands of families. The agreement is valid for 2 years, starting July 1st, 2025, and covers compensation, benefits, and working conditions. For teachers and other certified employees, it includes a 2% salary increase per year and additional paid workdays in the calendar. For classified employees, including paraeducators, the district specifies a compensation level equivalent to 8.5% over 2 years. That is 4% in year 1 and 4.5% in year 2. Paraeducators who perform specialized medical interventions also receive an additional permanent increase. The striking point in the negotiations was family health insurance. According to the school district, the employer will fully fund family health benefits at Kaiser levels starting January 1st, 2027, with, quote, meaningful relief starting July 1st, 2026. Schools and offices open to all staff on February 13 as a so-called transition day. Students were also off on February 16th through 17th, according to the calendar, and normal operations were to resume on Wednesday, February 18th for about 49,000 students. Behind the deal, a harsh but clear class struggle is visible. In the United States, workers are pressured to negotiate for things that are practically essential to life, that is, healthcare, housing, and basic security, because capitalism has made even welfare a market. When insurance premiums and the cost of living skyrocket, wages are no longer enough, and then only one means remains that can force concessions: the collective labor struggle that stops production and makes the system feel the strength of the working class. But the strike also shows the limits of any compromise within a system where schools are run under budgetary discipline and cost control, rather than according to people's needs. As long as healthcare, housing, education are commodities, and as long as employers and their political apparatus control the framework, this same conflict will return in new forms. Therefore, the teacher strike is not just a local dispute. It is an expression of the working class being forced to defend its reproduction against an order where profit and the logic of cuts always take precedence over the conditions of children and employees. In other national news, important labor developments are taking place in Chattanooga, Tennessee, as the workers of the Volkswagen Chattanooga plant reached an important tentative agreement with Volkswagen on February 4th, 2026. After stubborn deliberation through 2025, Volkswagen attempted to entice the auto workers with promises of $4,000 bonuses in their final offer. They even offered additional $1,500 bonuses if the deal was signed by Halloween of 2025. But the unionized workers of Volkswagen Chattanooga responded with a coordinated one-day shutdown of all production in the plant. They coordinated a use of sick time and paid time off to secure a mass call-out, which resulted in all production being canceled in the plant as managers struggled to reorganize the remaining workforce to meet requirements. Days before the mass call-out, the same union voted to authorize a strike, and they told Volkswagen that the workers control whether or not the lines run, whether or not the machines produce cars. What stands out in the case of the workers of Chattanooga Volkswagen is the fact that they have been the frontrunners of workers in the South in recent years. In 2024, they became the first foreign auto plant in the South to unionize with an election since the 1940s, and they joined the United Auto Workers Union. Now, in 2026, they successfully shut down production just after voting to authorize a strike and have forced the world's second largest automaker to agree to a deal their union committee members have described as life-changing. Historically, the states of the South in the United States have been known for their anti-labor and right-to-work laws that hampered unionization efforts and left the region with the lowest unionization rates in the nation, around 6%. However, the Chattanooga auto workers led a wave of organizing in the South, spurring efforts in Alabama and Georgia in 2024. Their success came after learning from past mistakes, such as those carried out by the United Auto Workers Union itself. For example, experienced organizers in the time reported that the UAW, that is the United Auto Workers, used to not allow organizers to talk to their coworkers about unionization inside their workplace. During the past unionization drives, UAW would set up tents outside of the location and across the street and make it increasingly difficult for workers to stay engaged in the campaign. In 2014, an organizing drive went on for over 2 years and had to be called off after committee attendance dropped from 180 to 50 workers as their aspirations were slowly pacified. However, in 2024, the workers took it upon themselves to organize each other, discuss unionization on the shop floor, and push for a union of their own. Even though they joined the UAW, it was an independent decision made after they were guaranteed autonomy to run their own campaigns and make decisions for themselves that were once denied to them by these establishment union directors. Now, in 2026, the same workers of Volkswagen Chattanooga have secured higher wages, job security guarantees, and healthcare benefits for themselves. Most importantly, they have also reported that this is just the beginning for them, and their efforts to motivate workers across the South will continue. They understand that their struggle is tied to the entire struggle of the working class in the South, and that they've demonstrated what it takes to effectively organize a union and push forward in a system designed to isolate workers. During a time when workers cannot rely on the legal system to protect them against employers, the importance of collective action is only more apparent. To understand why workers must fight this hard, we should take a look at the institutions that are allegedly designed to protect them. The National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, is the federal agency responsible for enforcing labor laws, which includes investigating unfair labor practices, running elections, and holding employers accountable when workers make their claims. In theory, it's supposed to protect workers so they don't have to rely solely on themselves, but it is effectively dysfunctional and incapable of handling the needs of the workers. This is the case with all institutions and agencies of the capitalist state. The NLRB quorum has 5 seats, but requires 3 members by law, and it is necessary for the board to issue decisions on union elections and cases on a national level. However, the quorum only had 2 members for most of 2025 and only recently regained a 3rd member. Many cases have gone undecided and their backlogs have been piling up. It is expected to fall below quorum again in August, leaving the board largely ineffective in its most fundamental duties. During that time, any employer could have the final decision of a case postponed almost indefinitely, and all they have to do is appeal an unfavorable decision of a lower court for it to be added to the backlog. Meanwhile, many employees involved in these cases lose their jobs or find it too difficult to defend themselves against employers when the system stalls. This impacts workers in the South most harshly, as one of their regional offices based in Atlanta is currently understaffed to meet its workload, and it is responsible for all claims or union election petitions in 8 states. Other regions may not be spread as thin, but currently 24 out of the 26 of their regional branches are understaffed. While the agency struggles and cases pile up, Congress continues to cut their funding, and the current Trump administration continues the trend of mismanagement. The deliberate weakening of one institution that challenges corporations, although with little improvement in the lives of the workers, highlights the importance of workers fighting for themselves and finding protection amongst each other. Companies like Volkswagen attempt to roll back any last semblance of social and labor rights. While they drag out negotiations and push cases into limbo, workers across the country, especially in the South, are left to fight these employers day to day and may lose their jobs or fall behind while waiting for arbitration. When the mechanisms of the bourgeois state inevitably fail, workers must confront the reality of their situation to the extent that they can enforce their demands. This is why the right to strike matters, a right that the Volkswagen Chattanooga auto workers secured for themselves. The strike is an important tool of working class power. As workers rise to meet the failure of the state, they are building the organized, discipline, and collective power that is the precondition for real democracy and control over all the conditions of life. The Communist Workers' Platform stands with the people of the world in the struggle against their exploiters and the systems that enable them. We welcome the transformative power of an organized and disciplined working class. In other international news, the U.S. and Israel are intensifying military preparations and threatening to launch a war against Iran, once again creating chaos in the wider Middle East to secure their interests in the context of fierce international imperialist competition. The new blackmailing ultimatums issued by President Trump for a decision in 10 to 15 days if there is no grand agreement that will satisfy the demands of the U.S. and Israel, along with the leaks in the U.S. media about the plans to launch an attack much earlier, are taking place in conjunction with the huge concentration of U.S. military forces in the Persian Gulf, in the surrounding seas, and the dozens of U.S. bases in the wider region. As of this recording, Trump expected a response on an agreement with Iran over its nuclear program by today. However, Trump has not ruled out the U.S. striking Iran and continues to mull the possibility of doing so, fueling the threats of war. Iran, for its part, stating that it is ready for any scenario, is nearing a deal with China for anti-ship cruise missiles. It must be noted, Iran signed a strategic relationship agreement with China since 2021, the plans of which included Chinese investments of $400 billion in key sectors. So far, Iran is offering the U.S. a series of incentives to sign an agreement that would allow it to maintain its nuclear program for peaceful purposes, such as halving its uranium enrichment rate and, most importantly, giving U.S. companies access to Iranian oil and gas fields. Political figures such as Senator Lindsey Graham have expressed regret that Trump's advisors oppose striking Iran, showing that segments of the political representatives of the ruling class are willing to plunge the region into a war. Israel, of course, considers this as a moment for a final showdown with its intent to end Iran's ballistic missile program. At the same time, the U.S. has amassed a huge firepower in the region. It is characteristic that the region of the Persian Gulf, the Arabian Sea, and the northern Indian Ocean has recorded the greatest military mobility of the U.S. since 2003, when together with their allies, they launched an imperialist attack against Iraq. The aircraft carrier USS Gerald Ford is expected to arrive off the coast of Israel in hours, while the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln has been sailing in the Arabian Sea for days. The two carriers are accompanied by dozens of fighter jets, warships, and missile-carrying submarines. Also, dozens of American fighters, bombers, and flying radars have been sent to reinforce U.S. bases in the Middle East, along with missile batteries and anti-missile systems. A series of reports in various media outlets have outlined scenarios for the scope of a U.S. strike. The New York Times reported that Trump is considering launching a limited attack on Iran in the near future to pressure Tehran into compliance. It states that if Iran continues to resist, this could be followed by a much larger campaign later this year aimed at regime change. The CWPSA condemns the threats and war preparations of U.S. imperialism and the state of Israel for a new attack on Iran. This region represents a cyclone of imperialist antagonisms which threaten to engulf the whole region into an imperialist war. A conflict with Iran, as another element of the competition between the great imperialist powers, is also a link in the imperialist plans for a new Middle East, as outlined by the first meeting of the nefarious Peace Council, which takes place alongside the aims of transforming Gaza into a protectorate of the U.S. and Israel. The workers and people of the United States must oppose the plans of the U.S. ruling class. And now we pass it over to this episode's guest speaker, Nathan Richardson.
Over the last few years, a lot of people have been searching for hope. Wages are stagnant, rents are brutal, healthcare is a nightmare, and the political system feels completely disconnected from everyday life. So when figures like Zoran Mamdani came onto the scene talking about rent freezes, free public transit, and standing up to real estate interests, a lot of folks leaned in. They thought maybe this is it. Maybe the Democrats are finally going back to what they once claimed to be a party of the working class. And honestly, that belief didn't come out of nowhere. Historically, the Democratic Party did position itself as a vehicle for labor, social reforms, and public investment. So when socialist language started popping up again, when words like working people, public goods, and economic justice were front and centers, many Americans thought they were seeing a real shift, a turn towards something bolder, something closer to socialism. But here's the problem. Rhetoric is cheap. And what we've seen since then is not transformation, but performance. Because if this was a genuine socialist turn, where are the results? Where are the free buses we were promised? Where is the rent freeze that was supposed to stop landlords from bleeding tenants dry? Why are people freezing and dying on the streets of New York City while politicians give speeches about compassion? Is this what real socialism looks like? Time has passed. Elections have been won. Press releases have been issued. But the material conditions of working people haven't meaningfully improved. That's not an accident, it's the point. The language of socialism was used to mobilize voters, not to challenge power. It was a branding exercise, not a break with the system. And it's not just Mamdani. Look at the bigger picture with Democratic leadership. They've already started backing away from that socialist rhetoric, trotting out more moderate candidates who won't scare off suburban voters or big money donors. They're worried about losing swing states or alienating the establishment. This back and forth exposes the truth. The party doesn't have a solid ideology rooted in fighting for the working class. They're opportunists, flipping positions to chase votes and cling to power, not to build a system that empowers workers. The political elite put their own power and election wins above everything else. They dangle hope to get us to the polls, but real structural change for working people, that's not on their agenda. Let's be clear. A party that won't confront capital, won't guarantee housing, won't provide universal public services, and won't protect the most vulnerable is not a socialist party. It's a party of people who want power without responsibility. Working people don't need symbolism. They don't need speeches. They need material change, housing, healthcare, dignity, and security. And as long as the political elite put electoral strategy above human needs, nothing fundamental will change. Keep questioning, keep fighting. Comrades, thank you. See you later.